All right, my peeps, we're live. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. It's been a while. It's been a while. I thought it had been like a few weeks, but I think it's been about a month since we had our last COVID cabal. Last one was a good one. Last one was a good one. And well, let me hear you guys get in the chat first. Let's get some of you guys in the chat. None of you are used to me being on time. I bet you anything, none of you are used to me being on time. You thought 9 p.m. meant 9:15 p.m. meant 9:45 p.m. So I know a lot of you guys are extremely confused at why I started at 9 p.m. on the dot. It's never happened before. What happened to Pat? Pat disappears for a few weeks and he's doing the COVID cabal on time. Very uncommon, very unusual situation. What's up, people? What's up, people? We'll see if we get a few more in here. No one's gonna know. No one's gonna know when. All right. We got people coming in. People coming on. Drinking some iced tea. Some iced tea. It's a kidney tea, actually. It's God, what is it? All I remember is it has marshmallow root in it. I made it myself, but I don't have kidney issues, by the way. I was looking up a protocol for a family member, and I got a bunch of the stuff, and they're not really drinking it, so I figured, well, if you drink wine regularly, your kidneys could probably use a detox. So I'll make some iced tea. It's squeeze a little lemon in it. It's quite good, but it makes you piss a lot. What's up, guys? COVID Cabal gang. COVID Cabal gang. To be honest, guys, we'll wait till a few more people get in here, but it feels like there's so much to talk about, and it also feels like there isn't. I know I missed a window of opportunity when there was a shooting. That would have been a key COVID cabal that did not happen, right? We can talk a bit about the shooting, but really, for me, what I kind of see going on here is what we've been talking about for a very, very long period of time. Yep, stock market's done. Crypto's getting hammered big time. And housing market's next. Coming this fall to a theater near you. The end of the end of the housing market too. It's gonna get it's gonna get a lot worse, and people are starting to come to terms with it. And we were talking about this. We were talking about it for a while. Now, bonds are maybe next. That's right. Did we get everything right, especially with timing? No, we didn't get everything right with timing. But because we talked about this stuff and we were thinking about it, we diversified and hedged accordingly, and regardless are not surprised that not surprised it's all occurring. Although I will say this, isn't it very different to live through something even than seeing it coming? And this stuff is starting to develop, and it's developing across all these different fronts, but economics are the big one. I mean, I'll just very, very briefly on the Ukraine war. This is a total fiasco at this point for the West. And they're even starting to pull back. I think the defeat has been so clear that they're starting to, thank God, abandon their plan of trying to double down in Ukraine, at least at the moment. The Ukrainian government, Zelensky, will not abandon these entrenched positions in the Donbass, and they're just getting hammered by artillery. I mean, Ukrainian losses are, I think if we're being honest about it, it's about 500 people a day dying, 500 casualties a day. That's just brutal. 500 a day is brutal. Absolutely, absolutely brutal. We haven't seen this kind of warfare in, I guess, maybe since the Soviets I mean, we didn't even have this kind of warfare when we were in Iraq, right? I remember it was a big deal in Iraq when we had like 10, 20, 30 people were dying a day during certain periods. That was pretty rough. I mean, to lose 500 people a day is unbelievable by modern standards. So the military in Ukraine wants to pull back and do maneuver warfare, which would be totally way smarter. You have a big, you have a, Ukraine. If you have to fight Russia from the north, east, and south, then you don't want to do fortified positions too much. Because fortified positions are good if you have only a narrow corridor to protect, but if you have big open plains and fields, you want to do maneuver warfare. And the government won't allow it to happen because of political reasons. Yeah, just put the box wine on the desk, please, Jeff, and we'll tap into that. No, actually, I'm not having any wine today, but I just want a quick note on the wine. There's a really, really nice liquor store at the shore. And when I say really nice, I mean they actually, like, the guy actually cares about wine selection. You wouldn't expect it based on the location, but he's really serious wine person. He gets incredible wines. And they had a whole shelf there of fantastic wines for ridiculous discounts, like amazing champagnes, $65, $70 champagnes, drop down to like $25, $30. I mean, I was just like buying up this shit. It's all my favorite stuff too. It's like Burgundies. So I certainly indulge, because the thing is, like, if it's really good wine, God, I just want to keep going. I like, if it's average wine, it's like I'll have a glass or two, it's whatever. But really nice wine, you just want to keep going. It's so good. It's so good. Anyway, so I'm pacing myself, taking a break. But yeah, Ukraine is, they're basically throwing away people for political expediency, but we knew that already. The big question here is that when the Donbass encirclement is finished, and people are like, well, why hasn't happened yet? Well, there's no reason for the Russians to rush it. The Russians are rotating soldiers in, even sometimes by the day. So their entire army's getting experience. They're all fresh, and they have the range and artillery. They can concentrate fire, so why sacrifice your men? I mean, you can see Russian and militia, like DPR, LNR losses, have declined dramatically since the first phase of the war. Now it's just Ukraine, and Ukraine's have gone up exponentially. So there's no reason why would you change up that strategy. They want you to directly attack fortified positions rather than picking out the flanks. So that's what we see happening in Ukraine. The question is really, because now there's been, I think, 6 draft riots. Well, Jeff, you're totally right. They're throwing away the mercenaries too. And honestly, I do not care at all. I really don't care. Volunteering to fight on behalf of that. I mean, I'm somewhat more forgivable for the individuals who went over there thinking it was something else. And then when they realized that they left, the people who are still there, I'm actually very suspicious about, what kind of people they are, that they would still want to be embedded and still want to fight. I know you could argue that they would have liked to leave, but they can't. But at any rate, the ex-special forces people, who in those cases, Jeff, I'm sure do have gear. The random volunteers are getting nothing. But if you're like ex-military people, ex-special forces in particular, I mean, those guys are actually serving pretty substantial roles. But yeah, tons and tons of desertions. They're using the Ukrainian SBU is basically acting like the SS now and rounding up, trying to find people who are not showing up for the draft. It's only about 10% of people are showing up for their conscription numbers. So they're going all over the place trying to find people. They're even starting to draft women. I'm hearing now they're starting to draft women. And the big question is, once the Donbass is completed, what happens to the Ukrainian government? Does it collapse on its own, or is it going to keep going? It's a difficult question because the population in Ukraine, not saying that they like Russia, but their anger is starting to turn against the Ukrainian government itself. And as a result of that, increasingly to Ukrainian nationalism itself. Because the individuals who have been pushing the ideas, it's kind of like how after World War II, you saw the Germans really just, to a negative extent, frankly, in Germany, which has such a great history, that you couldn't even be a German patriot, basically, as a result of it. The German identity was pretty much wrecked. And I think you're going to see the same thing happen with Ukraine at the end of this war, because the nationalism of Ukraine was built up. This isn't even like with the Germans that actually had a history prior to the Nazis. Ukrainian nationalism was not a thing Galicia, pre-World War I, let's say, and then it really got a jump start with the, with the Bandera people. So, the big question here is what's going to happen to Ukraine. My prediction is that you will for sure see annexation of Odessa and Kharkov, and probably the rest of it. So Novorossiya will be pulled away and either made an independent state or fully integrated with Russia. Probably an autonomous section of Russia would be my guess. And then you're going to see Ukraine proper, from Lviv to Kiev, remain a separate state, but that state will be a puppet like Belarus and will be integrated into Russia within the next 5 years, along with Belarus and Kazakhstan. That's my expectation of where things are going to go, throwing that out there. So that's the war in Ukraine. The one thing I just want to talk about on foreign policy before we get back to these questions about gas and economics and everything, which I know you're probably more interested in. I think it's worth spending a moment to talk about what exactly is going on, because we have the two factions in the foreign policy establishment, the neo-libs, which are basically the World Economic Forum, Davos, and the neocons, which are basically warmongers. And there's not a lot of difference between them. It's just kind of what they care more about. The neo-libs have the idea of controlling the world through social policy. And the neocons kind of believe that the U.S. is just this, the U.S. military is their little plaything that they can go and decide to shape the world in whatever way they want to. And they're working very much together because they both hate Russia, because Russia's against their objectives. So they both want war with Russia, and they both want to escalate the war with Russia. The neo-libs, because they don't understand the economics or care about the economics. I mean, people talk about, we've been talking about how this is going to deindustrialize Germany, this war. And because, they don't have any oil or gas, or it's extremely expensive to be able to produce things. I mean, well, that's going to be the end of German industry. And CEOs in Germany have said as much. But they don't really care about that, because the people in the World Economic Forum want to deindustrialize not simply Germany in particular, but the world. I mean, that's the whole Great Reset thing. They don't like industrial production. They don't like production of things. They don't think about commodities. They just think that if we want to have everything be electric and solar, and it's very PR, it's very tech, it's very not grounded in physical reality. So they don't even really care. And of course the neocons are they're like delusional about warfare, and they lose every war they get into, and yet they want to escalate every war they see. So the question is, why has this whole situation in Ukraine stalled out? And this is what I think happened. So first is that there is another faction in this global faction. And I'm not talking about even the Wall Street split that we talked about last time, which is a real one. I just even mean within the people who want this global control grid, the Kissingers, right? People who are very embedded in the cabal, but they are realpolitik people. They're realists, okay? They're mostly from the older generations when you still, in order to gain power, you had to pay attention to real things. I just want to make this point. A lot of the reason that the cabal is failing is because the older generations of the cabal understood what real power was based on, whereas the younger generations have become so enamored by mind control technology and public relations and PR that they have stopped even thinking about this fundamental stuff. They take it for granted, kind of like if you're some rich kid and your parents give you everything you want, you don't think about where that stuff comes from, and you just kind of blow it. They're so used to being able to get things that they want with PR because fundamentals have been in place that they don't know how to operate in a world where those fundamentals aren't in place. And so they just keep amping it up, amping it up, amping it up. So that older realpolitik faction seems to have gained control with the Biden White House. We know Biden's not obviously making any of these decisions. But there was a Biden op-ed a week ago that basically was more conciliatory and de-escalating. And it looks like that faction has basically said, look, we're going to lose this war. We got to stop throwing stuff in here. Yeah, Cabal has a millennial problem too. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's it's funny, right? They create their own problems. And so they need to pull back because they're not going to win if this thing escalates further. They can't afford the prestige, collapse of having, of having NATO stand off against Russia. Russia's way too prepared. NATO isn't. So I think that faction has, at least for the moment, gotten the upper hand, and it looks like what they're going to do is they're just going to say that the Ukraine war was lost because of Zelensky. They'll throw Zelensky under the bus and blame it on him, and let's not pay attention to what we did and how we caused this, as usual, ahead of the midterms. What I also think, though, is that if this is the case and it's not going to escalate again, which is a big fucking if, okay? What happens in China and Taiwan? Because that situation is escalating. And, I was listening to a good show with the Duran and Gonzalo Lira, and they were talking about this and about how, Russia is a very big land power, and and America doesn't have much of its army over there. America tends to think of itself as real force projection for America is its carrier groups. And China's Navy, it's growing rapidly. I think they just have their third carrier out, but fundamentally their Navy is not nearly as big as ours. It's not part of their prestige like ours is. And so it seems like because Taiwan also is very relevant economically to the United States, that we're using this as an area to push on. And so there's increasing provocation for a war with Taiwan. And long story short, I think that they're going to announce Taiwanese independence by the end of this, unless we have a pullback again, right? But the way things are going, they're looking for some place to push it. We have the war with Russia, and I'm not sure that that's done, but at least we have a cooling off. But we know that China's going to get in the mix at some point. And my big concern is that they're going to do something like in October, because at that point we're going to have a full-on economic collapse. And they're going to have some way of rallying the people behind them. And so I think war with China is a good way to do it. Especially because, and let's just be honest here for a second, it's probably easier to rally the full country in theory. I don't think it's going to work, but in theory, it would be easier to rally the country in a war against China than Russia. I think especially on the right, you realize you can take the left, you can make them do whatever you want, right? The percentage that's actually under the mind control, you can tell them to, you know, draw a penis on their forehead for Penis Appreciation Day, for Trans Women Appreciation Day, and you can have them draw a penis on their forehead and walk around, and you're going to have people who do it. They're just going to do it. I mean, you really can convince them of anything. So I expect that, but and I'm just going to be very blunt about it. There's much more of a I think visceral kind of, well, Russia is, we have our baggage with Russia, but I don't think America really views Russia as much of as a threat these days economically. They're probably underestimating them, to be honest. But China's been this big boogeyman, and let's be honest, they're also a different race. So we're dealing with this, with a country that is surpassing us economically and is larger than us in population. And there's more like emotional heft behind it, like trying to get the people to rally behind the war in Ukraine. There's some Cold War nostalgia you can play on, but nobody thinks that Russia is going to unseat America as the world's economic and global power. Again, I think it's a bit naive. I think Russia's going to emerge out of this extremely strong. But China is a more visceral thing, and we had Trump also talking about China his entire term. So, I mean, on the right, there's a real hatred of China that there was never about Russia. So, if there's a war against China, is it possible that you could start to see people rally behind the regime for a war? I don't think it's going to happen. People are going to hate the regime so much by that point. They're not going to believe a single thing they say, and they're going to know that they got us into the mess. But that doesn't mean they're not going to try to do it. That doesn't mean they're not going to try to do it. And I think what's going to happen is we will go to war with China, and we are going to lose at least one aircraft carrier. That's what I think is going to happen. Because they have hypersonic anti-ship missiles. And that's going to be and when we have that situation occur, and by the way, October is also big for another reason. October is right before the election, but it's also, from what I understand, April and October are those 2 months that you can really do crossings in the Taiwanese Sea. So if you have America provoke China, they're going to provoke them not only for their domestic purposes, but they'll provoke them at a time where China can actually pull off an invasion, right? And China, I think, will be fully mobilized for that in anticipation by that point. So we have a battle there, and I think that is when we start to have the real Cuban Missile Crisis standoff, where there's going to be are we going to use nuclear weapons? And by the way, if this happens in China, I think it's perfectly reasonable to think that there's going to be a further escalation in Europe against Russia at the same time. At that point, by the time we get to October, we're probably looking, by that point, Ukraine is not going to be around anymore. My suspicion is that the war in Ukraine is going to go on until around that time period. So it's kind of interesting. We'll see. Everything is really in flux. People talk about the timelines and how some timelines are collapsing, others are bleeding through. I think that you guys can agree we've approached certain timelines and then we've gone away from them, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. But this is going to be also important because let's transition to the economic stuff here. Okay, well, I'll just answer this question real fast. Chances Biden will say China created the virus as a rallying cry to go to war. I'm sure that they'll say that. I'm sure that they'll say it. But again, this is the person who locked us down and lied about that. It's going to be the hatred for the public is going to be so despised. I just don't think they're going to have any credibility. Jeff, I did see this as well. Yeah, they were invited by Nicaragua to come and clean out the biolabs. Very interesting. American media hasn't made a lot of comments on that. And by the way, I think the biolab stuff is real, don't get me wrong, but I will just also caution people to not blow it into the main reason that all this stuff is going on. There's a lot of reasons that Russia invaded Ukraine, and there's a lot of reasons, I think it was there for sure, but there's other stuff going on too. It is a pretext, and it'll be great for them in international courts if they can put that information out there and prove it. But so the economic thing here. So here's another reason why you can see this incoming war with China down the line, which is that when we have a situation with all of the economy going down, think about this from a taxation purpose. So we have the economy tanking. We have serious, serious debts, and now we have no real inflation to pay for it. So having a reason to default on our obligations to China would be very, very convenient for, the regime to say, now we've wiped the debt clean. We don't have debt anymore from our main debtor. And of course, that's not going to make things better economically, but it's going to be really bad actually economically. But it will put us in a situation where you can just see it as another reason that they would do it, that makes them more cover for economic issues. They tried to make Putin's gas hike, right? Well, they're going to say it's China's depression. So why would Russia go to Nicaragua? What's in it for them? Well, this is where you start to get into the thinking that, Putin is actually acting with the white hats and responsibility for the global order. I'm not like dismissing that out of hand. And I think if you have to couch it more in the background of a lot of countries around the world are, Russia, I don't think was intending to be put in that position. They didn't want it. I mean, Putin's turned a blind eye to this stuff and even worked with the cabal on certain things when it suited Russia's interest. Now I think that they're kind of being forced to deal with it because it is such a massive threat. But I think a lot of the stuff also that's going on in Nicaragua, the biolabs are part of it. And I saw that thread, by the way, very, very interesting and very, very compelling about, some of the stuff that was being worked on there and the coincidences. But this is also an opportunity for Russia to flex itself on the global stage. You now have multiple countries. You had the African Union, the president of Senegal, who's in charge of the African Union, have a summit with Putin, and he came out afterwards and he said the food crisis that's going to happen is solely the fault of the West. And now you're going to have wheat for rubles. There's a lot of countries that are looking to Russia and trying to basically put it, maybe move away from the Western umbrella. And I can go into that for a second, just real quick. At the out of the thread, it was in Telegram, and it's by this guy called Clandestine or Bioclandestine. You can go search for it on Telegram. It wasn't on Twitter. Probably get banned in 2 seconds if it was on Twitter. So what's important to understand with this is that the Fed's raising rates, and you saw the European Central Bank in response has had to start to raise rates as well. And you're seeing the euro, the pound, the yen, all of these other Western currencies are collapsing, and there's increasing demand for dollars. And so part of what the Fed's doing by amping this stuff up is it forces other countries to get dollars, because there's not a lot of dollars out there. And if you need the world reserve currency to manage transactions, you need to go to dollars. And so it's a way of forcing other countries to say, hey, don't you think about leaving our little circle if you want to be able to survive. Meanwhile, you have on the other hand the Russians, who I think are not fully prepared for this role and are having to step into it. I mean, Nabulina, the central banker, the Russian central bank, she almost looked like shocked at how well Russia was doing. Like, I think that she thought that things were going to go fine for them, but I mean, Russia's flush with money now. The currency has never been stronger. Inflation is dropping dramatically. They've had the lower rates. I mean, think about this. Someone made a joke that in order to stabilize inflation, Biden should tie the dollar to the ruble. And it's pretty funny to think about that. But so Russia is kind of being its strength that's just exploded onto the scene. I think even the Russians are trying to figure out how to manage it. I mean, Putin's a cautious guy, but there is this increasing interest from other countries to link themselves with Russia and China versus with the States. Because with the States at this point, with this regime, you're kind of like you're dealing with like the Mad King, some crazy group that is setting the world into complete chaos. And it's almost like a hostage situation. So you have countries, Brazil, Mexico, they're all just trying to get out. But yeah, all this stuff is to some form or another, it's coming to pass. And we're seeing the stocks go down, we're seeing crypto go down, and bonds are coming, real estate. Honestly, it's all going down. And we're going to have this stagflationary depression where the dollar is losing value, but it's losing value less than other fiat currencies. And we are, and we're really just gonna be eating shit. Gonna be eating shit. Price of gold and crypto markets manipulated. Do what you can, right? Prepare as you can. Eventually, after the default on the debts, perhaps, it's really hard to know exactly when it's going to happen. But you can see for certain eventually they're going to have to raise rates again. And that's when we're going to go into a hyperinflationary situation. And that's when I see stuff like Bitcoin becoming valuable and starting to decouple. But we're going to have to get to the bottom first, and bottom might not be till the very end of this year, maybe even the very beginning of next year. So, yeah, Steve, I agree with you. I mean, I heard it described by George Gammon, real estate doesn't really crash. I mean, even going to a bottom takes a few years in the real estate market. But yeah, I mean, look, the way to look at it, I think, with real estate is if you're talking about something you're going to use or own long term, it's 100% would have been a good decision to either lock in that low interest rate or to have got the land. Even if it goes down in value now, who cares? You got something for the future. I think the question is more like if you've been in development, what's going to happen to some of the places in development, because there's not a lot of housing for like starter homes. A lot of the housing boom has also been, and I can see this in a wealthy neighborhood, is that they take smaller houses and then they'll demolish the smaller house and they'll build a bigger house on the lot, a newer house that's assessed at a higher value. And so it's causing the value of the real estate market to go up. But there's still a lot of demand. I mean, there's still, from what I understand, a bit of a housing shortage. Although, we'll see about that, because the you-know-what stuff is getting worse and worse. And I'm knowing more personal people in my life who are experiencing some pretty unexplained side effects and stuff. And I mean, there's a lot of weird shit going on medically with people, and nobody knows about it. and the yeah, and we're just seeing the beginning of that. And monkeypox. What is monkeypox? Is monkeypox just results of the jab? Immunocompromised individuals? Is it just the beginning of that? I mean, it's starting with the gay population, but the gay population is a much more immunocompromised population, just given the nature of the sexual activity. So, guys, we've got a really crazy road ahead, and all I can say is that I am at peace with it all. I mean, even with the big hearings and stuff recently, which I won't go into, I mean, you can just feel it all unraveling, can't you? You can just feel it all unraveling. I mean, they had the shooting. They're going to try to push this gun bill. It didn't work quite as well as they wanted. Just succeeded in getting people pissed off. Still some more restrictions. But it got picked apart really quickly. I mean, as this goes on, it's just bringing the people more and more together. And I'm telling you, a lot of people doubt this. I get crap. I put some stuff out the other day that annoyed some people. Okay, whatever. I really do have faith in the public. They will wake up by the end. It's just that we have a lot of pain to go through. And, there might... acquaintances that are very, very liberal were commenting about the hearings and being like, this is total garbage, and have been starting to get pissed off about the trans stuff and saying they won't vote for Biden. I mean, the most freaking liberal people you could possibly imagine. It's moving. It's certainly changing. They've pushed too far, but what's going to start to really galvanize people is when the effects of the you-know-what start to come out more and more and more, which is going to be big this fall and winter, and when at the exact same time you're going to have economic catastrophe, the worst economic situation since the Great Depression. And at the same time as that's happening, we're going to be losing a war. And at the same time as that's happening, there's going to be more political theft and more evidence of corruption come out. It is a perfect storm, as they say. It's a perfect storm. So, there's going to be a lot of little points. I mean, I think that around the solstice, we're going to have another big inflection point. I agree with that. It's just going to keep happening, though. And so I'm like really optimistic. And that's one of the reasons I haven't jumped on here as much. I always like to do like a monthly maintenance with you guys at a minimum. But it's almost as if like I can see it all come together, and the reality is that we already made our choice. We already had our choice point, and after that, everything really does feel like it's a paradoxical statement. It's out of our hands. It doesn't mean we don't do anything, but there is an element of that you can't do really much of anything until the time is right. And we just needing to be patient and compassionate for those people, because they're the ones who are going to be really going through the pain and the shock and they're really attached to it. Whereas we can look at the economic situation and we can be like, yeah, I'm going to prepare. I'm going to go get these extra supplies. I'm going to do this. I have a garden. I've been spending time in my garden. By the way, if you're growing squash, man, people told me this. I had no idea. Those plants blow up so big. They're like covering up everything else in the garden. Just going to be zucchinis all summer long. But I'm I have no interest in fighting with people at all. we're all coming together here, and it'll be interesting to see where the world goes. But the way I've been understanding this is that the how do I put it? The Earth is moving forward, and it's really a matter of, are we going to stay with the planet as it goes through its shifts? Right now, we become like, because of these groups, we become such a plague on the planet, just negative energy, and the planet's the one that's moving up in consciousness. We're like along for the ride, if we can do it. If we can't, then we're gonna get washed out. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff about Trump being the Antichrist. I mean, there's another thread on it. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not to dismiss it. I mean, I just don't really care as much about it anymore. I don't know if he is or not. I mean, that just hasn't played out yet, and all I can say is that the fixation on it feels like doom and gloom, and it doesn't seem to provide anything productive. I mean, I don't want to say that we shouldn't be exploring those topics. I just don't, and people talk about 2024 and what's going to happen then. I mean, people have to understand. I'm not saying that there will or won't be a 2024 election. I'll be honest, I don't know if that timeline is decided yet. But what I want to emphasize for people is that we have to stop thinking in terms of, well, I don't know, I prefer DeSantis for 2024 versus like that. This is all political media brain that they programmed into you. It's not going to be like that anymore. It's not going to be talking heads being like, oh, well, polls indicate, voters prefer DeSantis. It's not about that shit anymore. That is ordinary, that's 3D matrix thinking. And we all still have residual aspects of it. It's going to, when this stuff collapses, the system is going to collapse as well. I mean, you look at the midterms right now. There's been enormous corruption in the primaries, and just making sure the right people couldn't get in for the primaries. I mean, even if we had a completely clean, regular midterm election, you're still going to have tons and tons of compromised swamp rats. It's progress. And look, maybe as things get sanitized in 2024, we are able to have really, really clean elections and clean primaries, and without the media, maybe this stuff does happen. But I don't know for certain. I do know that there is going to be a complete change in the global order. There's going to be a change in national borders and spheres of influence. I mean, I've said this before. I think US, Canada, and Greenland are going to become one country. So it's going to be, I mean, we're going to see 1 to 2. I mean, African Union, maybe that'll become one big country itself. I don't know. The regime's end goal is the elimination of 13 out of 14 people, and the rest of the people a controllable herd of slaves, basically, that can't do anything, can't go anywhere without permission. So, for instance, to give you an idea of how the CBDCs... Jeff, I mean, you have it completely correct. In order for the elections to be clean, the number of arrests would have to be uncountable. And so let's say, though, that they really are. Let's say that we do have this. Let's say that we do have this military faction that steps in, that does these mass arrests. I mean, is there even any confidence left in the system at that point? Or do we have some sort of period of military control? I'm not saying that I don't know. I don't know. I just think we have to think outside the paradigms of like, will Trump run in 2020? Like, I just don't care about that shit. I don't personally care about it. I don't think it matters. We are going to have to reconstitute government in the country. we can't. It's going to have to be such a thorough cleaning that God knows how it's going to go. We're going to have a constitutional convention. What's going to happen? We're going to have a constitutional convention. And there's going to be probably borders redrawn. There's going to be all sorts of, term limits. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens in this latter half of the 2020s. And we're going to have, is the African Union, European Union, Greater Russia, China, India. I mean, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it is. But to give you an idea of what they want, I mean, they want to tokenize your house. So, okay, well, you don't have a lot of money. Well, guess what? It's okay. You can take equity out of your house. You don't have to sell your house. You don't even have to do like a full-on loan. You just, sell some of your house tokens. And when you sell those house tokens, and you can, go buy your nice new car, and oh, well, it's fine. I got plenty of equity in the house. Well, then they have a housing crash, and then suddenly you're underwater, and then suddenly you don't own anything. Now, are you happy? I don't know. Probably not. But they have these little schemes. In Australia, there's a idea that they had, which would be that the government would own 40% of all housing, or of all like new housing for people. So people could afford it. They only had to, pay the 60%. But of course, you have a downturn, then, well, you already have a permanent loan. Like, you're not able to keep it under those circumstances. So it's going to be very, very interesting, the whole thing. But they're not going to win. They're not going to win. It's just, we're going to have to go through this, and we are here to go through this. We want to go through this. It's the greatest spiritual expansion. I mean, I don't know if maybe you guys can feel this in your souls. I can, certainly. But we're growing as much in, months to years as people did in lifetimes in the past. I mean, the amount of spiritual expansion. This is like special forces training. You have very, very minimal breaks, right? It's just one thing after another, and we're being forced to deal with our energy and our consciousness and our perspective as a result of it. And that's all we can really control. Look, this time next year, I'll either be a free man or I'll probably be in prison. It's the reality of the situation. And, like, I'm at peace with it. Like, the whole thing is, the system is going where it's going to be going. And we have to come to terms with that. You can only do what you can do. So, best time to be alive in that sense. I mean, I'm really looking forward to where we're going, but when we look back at 2020, spring 2020, election period 2020, early 2021, even last year, a little more quiet, but just talking about all the, the vax rollouts and all that pressure. I mean, we have really come a long way, and we are really just at the beginning of this. I mean, there's still so much more. By the time we're done all this stuff, we're going to be old men, and maybe I won't have any hair left at that point. I started all these COVID cabals. I still had my hair, and now I'm like, as it goes on, it's going away. So, Jeff, really, that's a really great comment. The investors who I associate with have commented, this is the last 2 years in the market, I've created a whole new class of expert investor. Yeah, I mean, we're learning fast, and we're making mistakes, but we're adapting. That's another thing, like commodities. Do you want to get in commodities? Do so at your own risk. I mean, there's a lot of upside, but it's very volatile, and you guys should know that. Um, yeah, Jeff, you want to shave my head? Well, I'm not quite there yet, man. I'm not quite there yet. Still fighting the good fight. But yeah, guys, I think that that's what we got right now. We'll keep in touch at least every month, but maybe 2 weeks. Hey, maybe something crazy is gonna happen. Maybe 1 week. But I love you all, and we'll continue to be in touch, and I'll see you next time.